What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today I am back with more delightful news about Keyforge and their organised play. I'm quite loving the Keyforge news we're getting at the moment. I told you the other day about Chainbound events. These are events which will be going on in local stores, and if you do well, your decks will be chained and gain power levels, and we didn't really know what they meant. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we do. Oh yeah, and we also now have more information on what Ember Shards are, how you collect them, etc., which is pretty gosh darned awesome. And what is really good here is that these events are really designed to try and build your local metagame at your local shop, promoting local competition. Here's a secret. If you want these games to be good and popular and played, you gotta go down your local game store and support them. That's extremely important. But if you want to go down your local game store and support them, you want something to play for. You want prizes, you want structure, you want goals. Well, it seems like Fantasy Flight Games are actually giving us that with Keyforge, and that's good. I have had some comments in relation to previous videos saying, come on, Wossy, these games, they're too big, they don't fail. Unfortunately not. Anyone aware that there was a G.I. Joe trading card game? It was actually made by Wizards of the Coast, the biggest tabletop gaming company in the world. There were 2 expansions, and then it failed. There was a Simpsons trading card game, The Simpsons, and that was published by Wizards of the Coast. That failed. How about Kingdom Hearts? It's not quite as big a license as The Simpsons, but it's still a fairly big license, and that wasn't made by Fantasy Flight Games, though it was published by them, and that lasted, I think, 5 sets before it ended up failing. Trading card games fail regularly, so we need to support Keyforge to make sure that that doesn't happen here. So, these Chainbound events then, what do they actually look like? Well, the theory is that you go down to your local shop on a weekly basis, and if you keep crushing with the same deck, we are going to add chains to your deck to make it worse and worse and worse. And I suppose at this stage it's probably worth doing a little bit of a side to explain what chains are and what they do. So in Keyforge we have a chain tracker, and it tells you how many fewer cards you draw when you would draw 1 or more fewer cards. So if you've got 1 to 6 chains, you draw 1 fewer card, 7 to 12 you draw 2 fewer cards, 13 to 18 you draw 3 fewer cards, and 19 to 24 you draw 4 fewer cards. It means that at the start of the game you are drawing significantly fewer cards than your opponent. But you do shed chains as you go along. So every time you would draw cards, you look at your chain tracker and you draw fewer cards. So if I would be drawing 3 cards but I've got 10 chains, I draw 1 card and then I shed 1 chain by reducing my chain tracker by 1. And then the next time I've got 9 chains, which means I still draw 2 fewer cards, and then I shed 1 chain. Eventually I get down to 6 chains, at which point I draw 1 card fewer than I should, and go down to 5, until eventually either the game ends or I get rid of all my chains and draw the same amount as I usually should. It is a way of balancing the playing field. You've got a better deck than me, so I need to add chains to your deck to give me a chance of winning. And this is important, right? Because Keyforge is not a trading card game, it is a unique deck game. Which means you buy a deck, maybe many decks, but that's what you got to play with. You cannot improve your deck or make your opponent's deck worse. You've got to roll with what you've got, which means some decks will inherently be more powerful than others. In come chains. Okay, so that's chains, ladies and gentlemen. That's how they work. So during the time of Triumph, what happens? Well, every Keyforge Chainbound event is run as a Swiss-style tournament with 3 or 4 rounds. If you're new to trading card games, then Swiss rounds basically means you play somebody who's got the same record as you. During the first round, you can play anybody in the store. who's involved in the tournament, obviously. And then if you win, you play someone who won their first game. If you lose, you play someone who lost. If you have a record of 2 wins, you play someone who's got a record of 2 wins. If you've got 2 wins and 2 losses, you play someone with a record of 2 wins and 2 losses. I mean, I know it's a 4-round tournament. It's just an example. The theory being that you end up playing against somebody with the same record as you, so you have fairer games. If you've taken a deck and you're having a bad day and it's not your best deck and you've got 0 wins out of 3 games, you do not want to end up playing someone who's got 3 wins out of 3 games and has clearly got a better deck and is having a better tournament. That would not be fun. And what's really cool here is that these Ember Shards that you build up on the app, these build up quickly. Now, bearing in mind that you get 1 Ember Shard for every deck that you buy, I assumed that getting Ember Shards at tournaments was actually going to take a little while. It doesn't. You get 1 Ember Shard just for turning up to the event, and then 1 Ember Shard for every game that you win. So, if you rock up to one of these Chainbound tournaments, and it's a 4-round tournament, and you go 4-0, you get 5 Ember Shards straight off the bat. Bearing in mind that you need 18 Ember Shards, this can add up quite quickly, 18 Ember Shards to get a key, and clearly going to Chainbound tournaments to try and fill up and get keys is a heck of a lot better than buying 18 decks and spending like $180 on Keyforge decks. Of course, when you buy a Keyforge deck, you don't just get an Ember Shard, you do get a Keyforge deck, and that's pretty good. Now, your event organizer will be able to run these either as sealed events or as Archon events. Archon, you take your best deck to play against other people's best decks. Sealed, you rock up, you buy a deck, you play with that deck. And Chainbound events are going to always be solo, which means you take a single deck. Some events in Keyforge, you may well end up having to take 3 decks and using them throughout the tournament and blah, blah, blah. Here, it's nice and simple. You just need 1 deck. So what about this whole making sure that some people don't win every single time? Well, frankly, we've got a table that shows us quite nicely. So if there are between 4 and 8 players, there are 3 rounds. And if you get 1 or 0 wins, you take away a chain. If you get 2 wins, you add 2 chains. 3 wins, you add 3 chains. What is very important to note is 2 things. Firstly, chains go on your deck. The chains do not go on you. Which means if you rock up the next week with a different deck, you can play chain free. It's not to take down players, it's to make sure that one player cannot rock up with an OP deck all the time. It also doesn't punish you for having 1 good deck. It's also important to note that these chains are put on between tournaments, not between rounds, so you're not going to end up going into your 3rd round with a bunch of chains on. That would be silly. If there are 9 or more players, we run into a 3-round tournament, and once again, 1 or 0 wins, you take away 1 chain, but that's where it changes. 2 wins, no change. 3 wins, you take 3 chains. 4 wins, you add 4 chains. Now, if we go back to the chain tracker, remember that you're on -1 until you hit 7 chains. So it's not until you hit 7 chains that it really becomes a huge problem here. That's the point at which we're like, oh, that sucks. Now, in terms of power levels, 1 to 6 chains, you get a power level of 1. 7 to 12, you get a power level of 2. 13 to 18, you get a power level of 3. 19 to 24, you get a power level of 4. Now, this gives you an incentive to keep playing with chained decks, because you can shed chains, but you cannot shed power levels. Now, this gets really interesting. Do you rock up to a couple of tournaments and try and lose to get rid of chains? Well, you can see in the table they've made sure we can't really do that, because you gain chains quickly, you shed chains very slowly, but you build up your power level. And this is important, ladies and gentlemen, because power levels are going to be needed for participation in certain events. Now, again, this hasn't been explicitly stated, but if power levels are given to decks, That seems to suggest that if you want to turn up and play in these tournaments where you need to qualify with power levels, you've got to play the deck of a certain power level. Now, that might not be the case. What they could do instead is say you must have X power level across all of your decks to participate, but I rather think it makes more sense to say you can only participate with a deck that has reached a power level of X. And just in case all of that wasn't cool enough, as you enter Chainbound events, your event organisers can, if they wish, supplement your rewards with the promotional cards from the Keyforge Season 1 kit. Each month you can earn new cards by playing games at your local retailer. Throughout the first month you can earn copies of a double-sided card with custom designs for power and stun. During the second month, you'll play for a double-sided Ember card, and in the third month, you'll play for a double-sided damage card. There is a prize gallery that shows them off, but of course, you don't need to check that out. I've shown you the images on the screen. And then, of course, as you build up your Ember Shards and keys, when you go to bigger events like the Vault Tour that I mentioned in my previous video, link in the description, you can trade these in for exclusive swag. I still want the hoodie. Ladies and gentlemen, everything I hear about Keyforge Organized Play just makes me more and more hyped for Keyforge Organized Play. My next job is to go to my local game stores, none of which are running these, and try and convince them to do so. Might I suggest you try a similar thing? But for now, tell me if you're going to be attending any of these Chainbound events. Tell me what you think about all of this in the comment section. Go nuts! But please do remember the most important thing as always. Look after yourselves until next time. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at the Wossy, where we talk about these kind of games. But by far the most important thing as always is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.